Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Agenda Forum on Wednesday, the 5th of March 2025 at 6 p.m. to those watching at home and to those in the gallery. The City of Swan acknowledges the traditional custodians of this region, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and their continuing connection to the land, waters, and community. And we pay our respects to elders past, present, and their descendants. The disclaimer is on the door, but it's also the terms and conditions of entry into this meeting are posted at the entry of the public gallery, and members of the public are advised to read them prior to attending this meeting and to abide by them. Tonight's attendance and apologies. We have Councillor Johnson, Councillor Catalano, Councillor Singh, Councillor Howlett, and we have...
Excuse me, I'm here. Thank you.
Sorry, attendance. Sorry, I did read attendance and apologies, but I was reading. So councillors, we have Councillor Johnson, Councillor Catalano, Councillor Singh, Councillor Howlett, Councillor Bowman, Councillor Jones, Councillor Zanino, Councillor Henderson, and Deputy Mayor Johnson and myself. And we also have apologies from Councillor Dawn, Councillor Knight, Councillor Oringo, Councillor Miles, and Councillor McCulloch. And I'll just ask if there's any leave of absences that need to be handed in. We have nil at this point, and we have nil declarations of financial and proximity interest and interest affecting impartiality. If you do have one, could you please hand it up to the acting CEO? There are nil petitions for this evening, and we move on to part 6, which is reports and notices of motion. 6.1, additional information from officers. 14.1.6 was revised terms of reference, the Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee, which is on page 118. There was an omission in the officers' report, and it should have noted that the Audit Committee recommended Council approve the revised Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee terms and reference. We move to 6.2, which is deputations, and in accordance with the current procedures for public participation at agenda forums, all requests for in-person deputations were required by 5 p.m. on Tuesday the 4th of February 2025, and all written deputations were received by 3 p.m. on Tuesday the 4th of February 2025, and they were circulated with the preliminary agenda on Tuesday evening. We move to 15.1, Councillor Catalano, Henley Brook Avenue Extension Environmental Assessment. Tonight we have in-person deputations in support of the notice of motion, and we have 3 speakers, and we have Mr Bogart from the Swan Valley Ratepayers and Residents Association.
The Swan Valley Ratepayers and Residents Association support the motion from Councillor Catalano on agenda item 15.1. The City of Swan has been promoting the construction of Henley Brook Avenue as if it is ready to start. However, it has not done its homework to check if the road is needed and all regulatory requirements have been met. There are many points, but here I'm listing only a few. First, the environmental study. There is not an up-to-date environmental study of the Henley Brook Avenue alignment. The City of Swan needs to organise this study. This is the City's responsibility. Structure plans and clearing permits refer to land as degraded, where degraded gives licence to clear land even if it's covered with mature trees. These are replaced by immature trees in landscaped areas, which are by definition degraded because soils have been disturbed and native plants removed. Second point is the road needed and what cost to the ratepayers? It is 4 years since the Council adopted the motion that a comprehensive traffic modelling study of Henley Brook Avenue with multiple scenarios was accepted. This study has not yet been conducted because Main Roads has not been requested to do so. To reiterate, there is no current conclusive evidence that the road is needed. Councillors note that if Henley Brook Avenue is constructed, the burden by the ratepayers will be substantial and will be confronted with ongoing maintenance costs for the life of the road. Both reflect higher council rates, and how do you as councillors sell that to your ratepayers? The third point is transparency. It is essential that the public sees the terms of reference of contracts before they are signed. Also, public access to raw data in digital form is required so facts can be checked. In the TV series, Yes Minister, Sir Humphrey Appleby said, "Minister, the season for transparency is closed." That is something that we do not, nor should anyone else accept. Opposing transparency is endorsing secrecy, which is not in the best interest of the public. Closing remarks. We request that the Council adopts a motion that ensure in full independent environmental study is done for Henley Brook Avenue alignment before any actions is further taken on the construction. That the Swan Valley Ratepayers and Residents Association has a say in the formulation of the terms of reference. That the city fulfills its obligations towards its citizens regards transparency.
Thank you very much, Mr Bogart. Councillor Bowman had a question.
Thank you. Knowing that the Swan Valley Ratepayers and Residents Association is against Henley Brook Avenue, why would you be supporting even the city looking at bringing back online Henley Brook Avenue south of Park Street when council's got a motion not even to go there?
Well, because first of all, we don't know, because I mean, we've seen between Park Street and Asturias Drive that there is also a hold up because the council didn't do its homework by having an environmental study. So we want to preempt. We want to make sure that all the I's and T's are crossed. That's the reason. And to make sure that otherwise it goes piecemeal, a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit there, and then it is, you know, before you know it, it's all done.
Okay, well, yeah, I don't agree, but we're not here to argue. Are you aware of how much this study would roughly cost?
No.
Okay.
Well, I mean,
thank you.
Okay. Councillor, is there any further questions? Councillor Catalano?
Thanks. Why do you think that we should be having this environmental study?
Because if the environmental impact is too large, then you shouldn't build a road. We are in 2025, we are not in 1925. And that's why, I mean, we are in a climate emergency, and it's essential. And the argument, yeah, we need a road because we need to stop traffic congestion. I will refer you to the Katy Freeway in Houston, Texas, that has 26 lanes, and you've seen many images of it. It is chock-a-block. It is congested. So building more roads, building more lanes does not necessarily, you know, alleviate congestion. Other solutions might have to be found, and modelling is one of the things that we have been asking for at least 4 years, and it hasn't been done.
Okay, so the question, I'll frame it differently. If the road is never built, is it still a good idea to have an environmental study done along the area of this road, proposed road, even if the road isn't done?
Yes, I think it is, because it will delineate a natural asset for the city of Swan, and they can even put a dollar value on, and the more dollars in those sort of non-tangible assets, or whatever it is called in financial terms, the easier they can borrow money for other projects.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bowman, did you have another question?
Yeah, can you explain that last answer? Because I had no idea what you meant then.
Okay, well, if you have street trees, they have all, you can put a value on them. I mean, there are plenty of papers and there's enough information there. If you put a value on the street tree, and then you have, then you add it all up, that has a value to the council. And, you know, I don't know how many street trees the city of Swan has, but it adds up into the millions, maybe tens of millions, maybe even more. So if you then give a value to all the big trees, all the mature trees over 40 years and all those sort of things in that whole alignment of Henley Brook Avenue, you could say, well, we have another $50 million worth of $100 million worth. So the more capital you have, you know, it's according to my accounting friends. I'm not an accountant. I don't understand the details either, but that's, there are papers on that. And if you want, I can send you a paper on that.
Okay. Councillors ask, is there any last questions for Mr Bogart? Thank you very much for your deputation and for the questions.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I have received a disclosure of interest from Councillor Henderson in this item, 15.1, a direct financial interest, and the reason is that the land is adjacent, his land is adjacent to the proposed road development,
Thank you,
and he has left the room.
Thank you, Mr. Coton. And so we have Ms. Janzek.
Thank you. What is the first step in planning anything? Find out what you're dealing with. This is the initial step employed by the city every time it tackles an aspect of local government responsibility, from provision of a cycleway to creating a core strategic policy. Staff use this methodology in every project because it ensures a solid basis for decision making. It is commonly referred to as orderly and proper planning. Consideration of proposals in relation to the environment, local communities and project-specific constraints, along with economic prudence and accountability, are cornerstones of the LGA's operation, and successful results are a measure of its reputation. So in 30 years, why hasn't an environmental assessment for the whole alignment ever been undertaken for this road? As I informed councillors last month, this alignment is awash with significant constraints, many of them with huge financial, social and environmental costs. Any one of them could derail the project, and yet the first step, an environmental assessment, still has not been done. This is not responsible government. Not only does it run the risk of being fiscally foolish, but it significantly decreases opportunities to find and consider other options. Already construction has been on hold for 6 months as there's not been orderly, proper planning. At least another month will pass before it's resolved. This piecemeal planning approach is extremely risky, not only because it jeopardises work schedules, which have financial consequences, but it will result in the sacrifice of extremely significant, essential and irreplaceable environmental assets, the very things the city uses to support its green credentials. The Urban Bushland Council has been at the forefront of protecting remnant bushland and has a solid knowledge of native flora and fauna in this state. They successfully work with government agencies and have been instrumental in establishing and fostering volunteer groups which maintain these places. I believe the local community has already demonstrated the breadth of its knowledge and wisdom after decades, and in some cases, generations of farming and stewardship of this area. This invaluable knowledge provides the basis for predicting outcomes and assessing risks. We are stakeholders, and along with the UBC, have a valuable contribution to make in ensuring the terms of reference encompass all relevant matters. I commend Councillor Catalano's motion and urge all councillors to support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Zek. Councillors, are there any questions? Councillor Bowman?
Thank you, and thank you, Jan. Jan, same question to you.
I was expecting that.
With the fact that this council has put a hold on anything south of Park Street, why would you want to bring this up now, and as opposed to only doing the study to Park Street?
Because what has happened so far is that it has been done in small sections and the cumulative result has never been assessed. If the road is addressed in small sections the way it has been, we will never see the whole picture, and it's the whole picture that has the most value. So rather than it going on and on in little bits and pieces along the way and the road being held up because the community are not happy with it or have concerns with it, as has happened now where it's been on hold for 6 months and will eventually be 7 months at least, we're looking at how do we actually approach this thing in a proper and orderly fashion, which is what planning is about. Why don't we do what we're supposed to do? Have a proper look at it and work out how we would deal with these issues and which ones are insurmountable. That can't be done unless we look at the whole road.
So, Jan, would you be worried that the fact that this city has put a stop on purchasing any lands south of Park Street, that this study, because it's wanting to go all the way to the highway, that might not be able to go ahead because we've got to get approval from every one of those property owners, as opposed to how much easier it would be in at least doing stage one study to Park Street.
Would you like to tell me how many landowners there are and where they occur?
I couldn't tell you that.
Well, I can. They're all south of Harrow. Before that, that's either developer land or it's land that the city already has. So there is no need to go and consult with other people for those areas, and that is what concerns us, that areas that are held in government hands will not be addressed properly.
And final question, obviously you were at a council meeting recently where this council wasn't too well received by the state government because we tried to suggest perhaps Henley Brook Avenue might not go further south, and we were overruled basically. Do you think this will be the same on this case as well?
I think the argument that was made by the solicitors for the developers was rather spurious, actually.
Councillor Catalano.
Yes, thanks. So, if you know the road is planned, it's just been put on hold. So, what do you think are the major threats to the environment? I mean, you know, that you can see from a layperson's point of view that are posed by Henley Brook Avenue being built.
Loss of remnant bushland, loss of black cockatoo habitat, loss of Penage wetland, fragmentation of Bush Forever 200, loss of Banksia woodlands both in the road reserve and Bush Forever 200, fragmentation of habitat for native fauna, loss of connectivity of the Regional Ecological Linkage 32, a significant wildlife corridor that links the Swan River to Whiteman Park through Bush Forever 200, loss of connectivity of the city's own local corridor along St Leonard's Creek, risk of contaminants from spillages getting into the environment, and the risk posed by the gas monitoring station.
Thanks. And why do you think that, or why do you believe, why do you know that remnant bushland is important to retain and conserve?
Sorry, say that again?
Why do why do you think that it's important to conserve, or at least know what kind of remnant bushland is going to be impacted by these kind of developments?
Well, I'd say this is particularly important for the black cockatoos because it produces, the remnant bushland produces food, shelter and nesting sites. It takes 120 to 150 years for eucalypts to form suitable nest hollows. For mature trees, this is critical to, for their survival. For other native fauna, it provides habitat. Even though it may be seen as degraded, it still provides shelter in vegetation, branches, leaves and bark. Native fauna is not just mammals and birds, it is also insects and reptiles that larger species feed on. There are two Nutsia floribunda trees, which are the West Australian Christmas tree, in the alignment section from Astorian Drive to Henley Street. Not sure how many exist in the remainder of the alignment because no flora assessment has been done. The WA Christmas tree is a particularly interesting and significant species. During its short period of flowering, Christmas tree is one of the richest sources of pollen and nectar for insects such as bees, wasps, ants and nectar-eating beetles, and is particularly favoured by the spotted Jezebel butterfly. The flowers also attract birds such as the red wattlebird, little wattlebird, brown honeyeater, western spinebill, New Holland honeyeater and silvereye. The yellow-rumped thornbill, black-faced cockatoo shrike and rainbow bee-eater eat insects attracted to the flowers. Up to six bee-eaters have been seen congregating at a single tree perched nearby and darting out to catch the insects in the air. The Christmas tree's foliage is more nutritious than any of the than that of the Banksia species with which it associates and appears to support more insects. This comes from the EPBC Banksia Woodlands TEC conservation advice. Remnant bushland also provides corridors between areas of more natural bushland. A site visit within the remnant bushland south of Asturian Drive uncovered indications of priority for quenda foraging with both holes and scats, which are noticeable because of all the insect exoskeletons they contain, and black cockatoo foraging on pine cones. So even the consultants refer to these areas as degraded, they still perform an important role in the ongoing life of native flora and fauna. Sorry, I have to read this because there's so much information there.
Oh, okay. With the Panage wetlands, that's a conservation category wetland, I believe.
Yes, it is. It's the
yeah.
only one that is left between Nangara Road and Reed Highway.
And what do you know about conservation category wetlands? Why are they in that category? What's so important about that?
Because they have really high quality vegetation.
And how's that important to the environment?
Well, you would have to ask me something like that. Now I have to find it.
Oh.
Sorry. It's densely vegetated vegetation and provides shelter and food and sources for many native species, especially the quenda. It is a source of water during the summer and a cool place for native animals when it is hot or recently extremely hot. The trees in its buffer are mainly marri, which are important forage, roosting and nesting species for the black cockatoo and also many of the other birds, particularly when it is hot, as the canopy of the marri is more dense and so cooler than other native species. That's the short answer.
Right, okay then. And finally, you know, why do you think that the environment why the natural environment and conservation of the natural environment is so important for humans, you know, the humans that live in their urban spaces next to these? Why is it important to conserve these natural environments?
I think there's been a lot of information that's been put out recently. I was listening to the radio the other day and they were talking about how important green spaces were for people, for their mental health, for a whole heap of things. I know for myself, when I'm feeling really stressed or have been in the computer for too long, I go out in the garden and bathing my eyes in shades of green is the most wonderful thing that can possibly happen. But without those things, that we don't have all those species that we've drawn on for all the medical advances that we've made, without having the environment, we might as well be robots. It would take away everything about what makes us human and what makes life worth living.
Although we can't be robots, can we?
Well, not yet anyway.
No. Okay, thanks. Thanks,
Okay.
Jane.
Councillors, did anyone else have a question for Ms Eck? All right, thank you very much for your deputation, for those that information you provided us with. And our last speaker is Mr Harry Gray.
Yeah, thank you very much. Harry Gray, I'm a Swan Valley farmer. I'm supporting Jennifer Catalano's motion and also the work proposed by the staff with the other necessary work before a road can be finally planned. My family's lived with this road alignment for 31 years, and we include horticulture and livestock, and we're in the Swan Valley priority agriculture area. Now, Henley Brook Avenue should have been built through the adjoining urban zone, where it belongs. That's what it's to serve, for God's sake. But this appalling planning blunder can now be reversed, and the responsibility lies fully with the City of Swan and DPLH. It's a total cock-up. We now realise the road reserve, which was always sold to us by the City of Swan as the road, is in fact only a concept plan. Until you do the work, you don't know what your constraints are, you don't know where the road should be. So get on with it, is my attitude tonight. But more is needed. The staff plan skipped, for some reason, the traffic modelling. Now, the existing traffic modelling modelled the road, didn't model the need for it. So you need to do that again, and you need to do it correctly. The other major miss by the staff was risk analysis. And this is actually, I think it's a legal requirement that you do a risk analysis, and it wasn't on your list. Now, the major concerns here You pass actually through the APA gas metering station. That's above ground pipes, high pressure, it's vital state infrastructure, and the cost implications here are huge. You go very close to two schools, and in the case of the APA and ATM training centre, you actually go through their property and make them a bit smaller. Runoff water from the road will saturate the already high groundwater level, and that'll kill native vegetation in bush forever and flood people to the east, and we are already flooded. And the other major safety concern is the road will be elevated by a minimum of 2 metres. Now, that'll kill all night flying birds that travel across it from one side of Bush Forever to the other side of Bush Forever because they fly low. But yeah, we'll worry about that, will we? And and particularly the gas APA gas metering station, if you're going to go through that at 2 metres elevation, you're going to go through it above it. And that station's already on an S-bend, so it's really poor planning that should have been corrected in 1994 when somebody drew a line on a map and said, that'll do. And ever since then, it has been called the road, and we're going to build it. So to answer Aaron's question, the road shouldn't have been built here. It's almost too late. And I want you to get on with the work and see how difficult and problematic and the big issues with this road, and then find alternative routes before all those alternative routes are closed to us. We've already lost the main one, and that was to put it through the urban area.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And I'll ask councillors, does anyone have a question? I'll have them after.
I answered your question.
Does anyone have a question for Mr. Gratt tonight? Councillor Catalano.
So what environmental? Because this is requesting an environmental study. What kind of focus or what things do you think the environmental study might capture along this area of this proposed road?
Well, the environmental study, from my experience being flooded by Dayton, the main thing you're going to see is a rising groundwater level, and that'll kill your Banksia woodland, and that's a threatened ecological community protected by federal legislation. And I mentioned that to a planner in this city of Swan at one stage, and I said, this might happen. And his answer was, oh, we'll learn from that. Well, I don't want to learn from that. I want to prevent it happening.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Councillors, are there any further questions for Mr. Gratt? Thank you very much for your deputation. Thank you to those of you that came in the gallery tonight for your deputations, and for those watching at home. Now we move to 6.3, which is councillor questions. Oh, sorry, Councillor Bowman, you had a question to start.
Can staff tell me how much this study will cost?
Oh, come back. Just going to ask Councillor Anderson to come back in. Can you just
I'm
repeat?
talking about the item.
Oh, still? Okay, thank you. So
Can staff give me a ballpark of how much this study is going to cost?
As outlined in the officer comment, we haven't done a detailed estimate, and a lot of it would actually depend on the scope of work. And you know, some of the people making deputations have talked about some of the things that should be in there, or etc. So it's very difficult to provide a estimated cost. And I'd preface my comments by saying that it really does depend on quite a variety of factors. But as a ballpark figure, you know, perhaps you'd be looking in the order of $100,000.
Okay.
There were, you know, other studies that we've looked at, similar ones, you know, for less than that, around 40 or 50,000, but for differing lengths of road and differing complexities. So, but I think that would be a ballpark. But I would really emphasise that, yeah, no detailed costing work's been done.
And what budget cost code is this coming from? Because it's unbudgeted, or is it budgeted?
It would come. There's no budget for it at the moment, so it would be something that would be in the potentially in the 25-26 draft capital budget. So funding could be added for that. There's money available for this project through developer contribution plans. There would be some municipal funding that would be required, and it is likely that that we would be successful in getting some Metropolitan Regional Road Group funding as well.
And the developer contribution plans, is that for the whole length or is that just to Park Street?
I don't have the exact details in front of us, but the developer contribution plan isn't for it doesn't cover the whole length, but it can cover a reasonable portion of the section down to Reid Highway.
And final question, can council pass a resolution that commits a future council meeting to funds, i.e. this is saying it's going in the budget or spend it, whereas council will adopt the budget in first week of July, I expect. So is that allowed?
I don't think there's anything in the motion that would prevent it being considered by council as part of the budget process. It's request the CEO to take an independent, comprehensive audit and inviting members of the Urban Bushland Community and Swan Valley Ratepayers and Residents Association to be involved in the drafting of the terms of reference. So there's nothing specifically in there that says that it has to happen in 25, 26, though that would be the logical thing if council make a decision to progress with it. The budget hasn't been adopted as yet, so that would be, I guess if it does proceed, that would be my recommendation that it be included in the draft 25-26 budget and council consider it as part of the budget process. If it's not adopted, then it would need to be done in a future year.
I think Councillor Howlett, did you have a question first? Right, Councillor Catalano?
Just wondering what the estimated cost of the whole road would be. Just based on, you can actually base it, although it's probably not very accurate, but I mean, how much has the road cost from, where has it gone from, Nangara Road down to where it is now?
We haven't,
kilometre?
because the work's actually been put on hold for 4 years for the section south of Park Street, so we haven't updated our estimates. So we can, I don't have the previous estimate to hand. We can certainly circulate that to councillors, but I would emphasise that it is,
Okay.
we don't have an up-to-date one.
Thanks. And could you also circulate how much has been spent on the road from Nangara Road down to
Point of order.
where it's got to? Sorry, it's a question. It's a question.
Just one moment, Councillor
Sorry, you're not the
Catalano.
presiding member.
Just one moment. It can be a point of order.
Sorry, how can you have a point of order?
Just one moment. Can you have a councillor? Just one moment. Can there be a point of order in an agenda forum?
And while we're thinking that, would be
Meeting procedures, local law do apply to the agenda forum, so yes, there can be a point of order.
Councillor Catalano, just one moment. And Councillor Bowman?
6.8 relevance. We're talking about an environmental assessment. We're not talking about the construction cost of a road.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Bowman. I'll uphold that point of order. Councillor Catalano, if you could
I'd
please.
like to make a request for that figure to be made available to me.
Okay.
I mean, and I guess other councillors, if they're interested, I'd like a request for the cost of the road from Nangara Road to where it's got to be given to me.
Thank you.
It's a
Mr. Creighton,
request.
if we can
Thank you.
circulate that.
I think we did provide we have provided council with estimates when we did the briefing previously, so
Would you be able to do that
we can
again?
recirculate the information.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillors, are there any further questions to staff? Councillor Howlett?
Thank you. Can I ask why the traffic study wasn't done or hasn't been completed, considering it was a decision of council 4 years ago?
Mr. Creighton?
Well, that traffic study was done and council were briefed on it. And copies have been provided to the Swan Valley Ratepayers and Residents Association.
Okay. Councillors, are there any further questions of staff? Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I've got a question, Madam Mayor, about 14.1.4, which is the annual meeting of electors. Question
I'll just ask Councillor Henderson to come back in now, since we've moved to a different item.
The question I've got is about how we're going to, the procedure will apply on the night, next Wednesday.
Sorry, can you just repeat that again?
So my question is about the procedure that we're going to apply for 14.1.4 annual meeting of electors 2025, consideration of motions So we've got a number of different motions, and from the annual meeting of electors, we've got 15, and some councillors may wish to move amendments or alternate motions supporting or otherwise the various motions. So how are we going to do that? The question is, are we going to move the officer's recommendation and then make amendments to it? Or is somebody going to move an alternate motion and then we amend that? So I'd like to know how we're going to do it so we don't end up in a situation on the night. Also, it will allow us to prepare our amendments or alternate motions or what have you.
Through you, presiding member, I do recall last year we did ask council to confer. Council came back with a group of motions that they were happy to move en bloc, and then others were discussed, debated individually. So if council would like to do a similar, to do that in a similar way.
So we've been told previously we can't make those kinds of decisions in these forums. So the question goes back to the original question, is what's the process we're going to follow? Are we going to move the officer's recommendation and then have a series of amendments? Is that the process? Because I don't want to be caught out on the night. We've got some different way of doing it, so I'd like to know now how we're going to do it.
I think I'd like to take that on notice then and consider it with my colleagues.
Okay. And Councillor Howlett, sorry, I think you had another question, but I didn't realise it was related to 15.1. Is that correct?
It's related to the Henley Brook extension.
Yeah, so sorry, Councillor Henderson, I have to just ask if you can pop out one more time. I was going to say that, but you know, really. Councillor Howlett.
Thank you. So it was in reply to the Mr CEO's response. I don't think I was on council at that time because I believe that was a May 2021 decision of council. So as such, could I get a copy, please, of the traffic study circulated to me with response to that motion?
Yes, we certainly can. I'd point out the decision to put the work on hold was, from memory, I think it was March 2021, when you may not have been on council, but the briefing to council on the traffic modelling was last year. So there would be a copy presumably still available in on the system, but we will circulate that to you.
Councillor, is there any other further questions on 15.1? I'll invite Councillor Henderson back into the chamber. Thank you. Councillors, are there any further questions to staff in regard to the items on the agenda? Councillor Catalano.
I've got a question to Mr Russell about the transport depot at the ministerial decree one, which is, where we get to it, here we are. 14.3.2. Okay, so basically this transport depot, if it is, well, obviously the minister's all for it. So does that mean that the rail link, the new freight rail route through Hazelmere is basically going to be stopped by this transport depot?
Through you, Madam Chair, in essence, the Minister is not making a decision for or against the amendment at this stage. The Minister is merely requesting by way of a direction that the City advertises it for public comment, ostensibly to allow a more robust and thorough consideration of broad views of stakeholders on the proposal. And you might anticipate that might also encompass contemplations as to what the development might entail for the potential realignment of the freight rail line across this land.
Another question, follow up. But it's correct, isn't it, that this parcel of land is actually, part of it is actually on the reserve, the rail reserve that's currently reserved for the freight rail?
Through you, Madam Chair, that is correct. And in point of fact, it was one of the reasons why we suggested that the state should not prejudice itself by entertaining this amendment when it's a live prospect that it might need to utilise the land for the railway expansion. If I can make an editorial comment, I find it very surprising that those considerations didn't hold more weight with the Department Minister.
And
Further question?
yes, thank you. That section of the rail reserve, am I correct that actually that's just before there's a sort of round corner for, trains obviously can't go round corners at sharp angles. They've got to go round at a very kind of gradient corner, that this piece of land, if it is developed on, will actually basically mean that the trains won't be able to turn from east to west to north to south.
Through you, Madam Chair, look, I'm not in a position to speak around what the potential implications could be on the function of the trains if they were to traverse this land through a freight rail realignment, other than it becomes a live factor if this amendment that encompasses further development of the land goes ahead.
Finally, so if council was to say no to this request, what are the implications for the land, and what are the implications in terms of what happens next as far as the minister goes?
Through you, Madam Chair, look, I've provided an answer to a question from Councillor Bowman asking what are the implications. Look, at the end of the day, the Minister has issued a direction, and having failed, as our report seemingly has failed to persuade the Minister of the merits of not supporting the amendment straight off the bat, it can be taken that the Minister has made a clear expression that he wants the amendment to be initiated for public advertising. So if the Council refuses the direction, the next step is the Minister can cause it to be initiated for public advertising in any event. And in the past, and there's only been one other instance in my time here at Swan, that a Minister has ever given this councillor direction, and as the Council may recall, it was the direction to advertise the telecommunications infrastructure amendment over lot 1003 Vidello Drive, The Vines. So whilst that was then Minister Safiotti as the planning minister, we're now dealing with Minister Carey, we must reasonably take it that having issued that direction, that if the council says no, the minister will cause it to happen in any event.
Okay. Further question or no? Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I've got a follow-on question for this item for Mr. Russell. I'm just looking at page 247 and I'm looking at the table there with the conditions, and it says all additional uses over the land are to expire within 6 months from the date of the rural residential zone portion of the land being acquired, I presume by the state government, for the purpose of a railways reserve. And 2, it says the use of the transport depot is generally restricted to the existing buildings on the lot, etc. My question for Mr. Russell then, does that mean then that this transport depot could be considered to be temporary in nature and not likely to actually prevent the currently approved realignment of the freight rail being actually executed?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you. that condition there, with respect, merely states the obvious. It doesn't matter what a scheme says. If the state wishes to acquire land for a public purpose, whatever the approvals, it will do so, either by acquisition or compulsory acquisition. What is salient here is that if you approve the expansion of a land use, then obviously the implications are that if the state wishes to acquire it, the cost at which it will have to acquire it will be greater. So it's not saying that it will prevent necessarily the alignment of the freight rail through this land. But necessarily, I imagine what will happen here is if you intensify land use, you are increasing the cost that you must pay to acquire the land.
Now, I had questions from Councillor Bowman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. 14.1.1, the corporate business plan. The revenue rating plan, I noticed going along the lines, that's the only thing that stood out was yellow, and we're not on track. I asked the question, and the response was that due to the December OCM, Council decided to undertake community consultation prior to endorsing the revenue and rating plan. Community consultation is scheduled for June following the strategic community public consultation process, which ends the 30th of May. So my question is, when did Council decide that we're deferring it all the way to June after the strategic community plan, or is that an administration decision?
Mr. Coaten?
I'll defer that to Mr. Travascus.
Through the chair. So, yeah, that was a decision made based on availability of resources to conduct the community consultation and engagement.
Further question?
So, follow-up question to that, when were we going to get told about this, considering I do believe it's a KPI of the CEOs as well?
Through the chair, there was comment made in the report on the corporate business plan that engagement was beginning in June. So that was reporting back to council. And I'd just like to add that this city, whilst the formal consultation period and receiving submissions from the community will commence in June, the city has commenced conversations with the Ratepayer Associations group to ensure they're updated on the plan.
Could I be advised what ratepayer group that is? Because there's probably a few impacted, and I hear one, not plurals.
Through the chair, I can confirm that there has been a meeting with the Bullsbrook Ratepayers Association, and then we're working through a list. So it hasn't all occurred yet, but we are working through a list to make sure that we get in contact with all of those associations.
Okay. My next question is on 14.1.2, proposed City of Swan waste local law. We take those councillors, only a few of us that were here last week, back to the presentation where we now have got the local law. We were advised that it was a council decision to deconsolidate. I've since been told that occurred not a couple of years ago, but December 2017. Why is it urgent now that we're not going through the normal process when we've done really nothing in 8 years on this part? I noticed the response that I've got back, how we've done the shopping trolleys, the parking local law, the fire local law, the bushfire local law, which I don't think most of that is from the consolidated. And I've also got back that it takes 12 to 18 months to make a local law. Am I correct that we can be doing 3 or 4 local laws at the same time? We don't have to finish one, then start the next one?
Mr. Coaten? Do you want to go? Thank you.
Through you, presiding member, that is correct. We don't do one at a time. However, they are very labour-intensive pieces of work to do. The city has limited resources. The subject matter experts who work on the local laws have other responsibilities. So it runs through various parts of the business that take their particular role in the process. And whilst we will inevitably have to run some concurrently, we are trying not to do that, just to ensure that we do have the right resources available when we need them, because people have to continue to do their, in quotes, day job.
So can I ask what would have been the cost of consultant, since we've potentially throwing money around at the moment? So if we haven't got the resources, I see we get contractors and consultants in to do everything else, from pulling weeds to mowing lawns to doing studies. Have we not looked at that?
Through you, presiding member, yes, we have. However, the expertise exists within the business, and it has been felt that it is best to get those subject matter experts to provide that input into the local laws. They then will be reviewed internally by our legal team, and it will also help to build our internal knowledge if the work is done in-house.
Following on with the waste local law, and my apologies, I couldn't ask these questions at the workshop because I didn't see the local law. I asked the question about, is the local law being proposed, and maybe it's me, but is it being proposed due to the high contamination of the FOGO bins? And the response was no, waste local law has wide-ranging benefits for the city's community and environmental sustainability. Would one of those wide-ranging benefits be that we can now fine our residents and ratepayers $350 for putting their rubbish bin on the footpath?
I wouldn't say that would be one of the benefits. The intent of the local law is to bring all those issues together that the city needs to address as part of that. So the issue in relation to the correct placement of bins is important to the city, but it's not. I wouldn't say it's one of the reasons why the local law, the overriding reasons why the local law was written.
It's good to hear, because I wouldn't have thought it'd be a benefit. If it's to actually get people to put the bins in the right spot, why have we got quite a few fines or infringements for a whole lot of different things? Some of them even I was scratching my head what that meant.
The local law is based on the Walga draft local law, which does contain a number of infringements as well. So certainly infringements would be an absolute last resort. It's not intended that we would be using them. Certainly education is the approach that we would use. So as explained at the briefing session, the infringements would be an absolute last resort, and so we wouldn't anticipate using them regularly.
And last question on this item, good segue into what the acting CEO said. At the workshop or briefing, we got advised that it's based on the Walga model local law. Can we have, please, a copy of what our proposed local law is and what the Walga model local law is, so I can see what's changed?
Yes, we can circulate it.
Okay. Obviously, I've got a question on 14.1.3, but staff can answer that in due course. When we look at the 14.1.6 revised terms of reference, and I note the audit committee, and it was my motion, basically identified that we're going to have to sack one of the councillors on the audit committee because it's going from one professional to two professionals unless we change the terms of reference. I notice we've had 6 audit meetings. Is there any councillor that has attended no more than half meetings?
Yes, I believe that information was circulated to all councillors today.
Sorry, I'm just...
So, yes, the information that was circulated in answer to your question, so you asked what is the number of attendances since October 2023. So Mayor Richardson was 6 meetings, Councillor Bowman was 6 meetings, Councillor Miles was 6, Councillor Henderson was 5 meetings attended and 1 apology, Councillor Singh was 3 meetings attended, 2 apologies and 1 leave of absence. An independent member, Mr Philip Graber, 6 meetings attended.
Okay. 14.2.1, the Bellagera Improvement Scheme. It's probably a follow-on from my question, because it's great that we're actually looking at TODs now. Why is it that the state government, I assume it's the state government because they control most of the land, and want infill, and we hear about expanding the frontier of the metro area and everything like that, why haven't they been proposing more TODs along the train line to Allenbrook? Transit-oriented development.
Thanks, Mr Russell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm filling in for my colleague, Mr Vanderlyn, this evening on this item. If the question is why hasn't the state government done more on the promotion of TODs along the Allenbrook train line, I believe that's part of the plan. I believe the Metronet project will look at recovering as much developable land and returns on that it can possibly get, including any land that it might own. The department's been extraordinarily busy over the last 5 years through the government's planning reform program. As an observation, it has probably more on its plate than its staff that it's capable to do. So the timelines around why is these projects and the instruments to realise TODs taking so long, I would hazard a guess it's for that very reason. They are doing it in their own timeline as they move through these things. It's not an easy process in terms of these instruments of improvement schemes and planning control areas, but they are getting through it, and this is finally before us. And that's the reason why we can only report on these matters as and when the government advances through the planning system the instruments to develop them.
So would that also then mean that if the state government, if I heard you right, Mr Russell, in their own time will be looking at the TODs, the Whiteman train station, the land to the west of the train line, which was a little bit of a, I forget what colour it was in a planning map we've got, that potentially could be a TOD there as well?
Through you, Madam Mayor, any undeveloped or underdeveloped land within proximate distance of a high frequency transport route such as a train line can be developed up as a TOD. The government in Victoria is doing that as we speak in relation to its rail programs. It's not a new thing. They've been around for a very long time. And the obvious planning principle is that it allows the maximum opportunity to utilise means of transport other than the reliance on the private vehicle.
And just following on from Councillor Catalano's question, because obviously I asked a very similar question about the Minister telling us what to do. Obviously we've got a state election on Saturday, and look, you know, I suppose possibly, I can't see it, but possibly Councillor Henderson could be the next Minister for Planning if the Libs got in or that. But if it changes, even a change of minister, do they reissue it, or because it was made by the previous minister, it's still in play?
Through Madam Mayor, I would expect that it would be in play irrespective of whether or not there was a new planning minister, but it's all speculation.
My next one's on 14.5.1. And again, apologise, I got these to staff late. It's regarding the Bellagera play space. Can I have a bit more explanation of why the $2 million cost blowout? And when did we know about it?
Yes, there is some information that's contained in item 14.5.4. So the project budget was across 2 financial years and was adopted, totalling $6.4 million. Based on the construction tender, the forecast cost increased to $6.8 million. However, this information wasn't available at the time of the 24-25 budget. In addition, there was $400,000 of variations that were received as a result of drainage and sewerage works required by the Water Corporation. And that adjustment also includes the return of $500,000 from the deferred project reserve for funds that were put aside in 23-24 for the works.
14.5.2, I'm just happy to get those responses to a number of questions on the list of accounts. But can I request that we look at the descriptions, because a lot of my questions have come about because of poor descriptions. For example, we're hiring a 2.4 by 1.5 metre trailer for about $4,000 or something. And I could probably go to John Puppas or something and buy one a lot cheaper, but it was all these other things there as well. There was a $4,000 bill for water, but it was only $600, so maybe I'll just get that in due course. The annual budget review 24-25, what's the human resource award project that needs an additional $264,000?
Through the chair, so obviously this is being provided, but essentially that's in relation to the transition of all local governments from the federal industrial relations system into the state industrial relations system. So during the year we had a couple of employment bargaining agreements that needed to be negotiated under the new system. There's complex changes due to that legislative change, and we've required specialist advice through those negotiations, and also looking forward with agreements with other staff not covered by those EBAs.
So, follow-up question to that, did we not know about this at budget form, when we informed the budget?
Through the chair, yeah, we obviously knew that the changes were in place, but it is a new system, and some of the learnings negotiating under the state industrial relations system compared to the federal one weren't known at the time, and it has been complex negotiating. I guess the main change is that we negotiate directly with the unions as opposed to putting a vote to all employees. So there were some unknowns. Hence the additional advice that we had to seek.
Next question on the budget review, and my apologies, we don't seem to get briefings anymore on budget reviews, so now's the time. There's a lot of items that were very, very under budget. Is it Farewell Street? 700,000 budget, need another 600,000. The sports light at Coongamaya Oval, I've just picked a few. 53, needs another 57. The one that's really hard to even say out loud, the Allenbrook Town Centre car parking budget of 50,000, needs 150,000 more. Are we going to get further explanation of these and why, for example, the Allenbrook Town Centre parking budget blew out by 4 times as much?
Yes, we can provide further explanation of those. In relation to any project, there is always latent conditions and unforeseen circumstances. So in any construction job, any project, not just ones that the city does, ones that everybody does, there's always unexpected things arise. So in relation to Fall Street, additional budget was required due to the need for micro-tunnelling. It had originally been planned to be done by open trenching, but there was a Water Corporation sewer line in the way, and the Water Corporation wouldn't allow us to use open trenched excavation, so had to use micro-tunnelling, which is a lot more expensive. Coongamaya Oval, there was upgrades that were needed to the power system by the power supply by Western Power, which at the time that the work was costed we were unaware of. And in relation to Ellenbrook Town Centre parking, more work was done in relation to the parking in that area, obviously to coincide with the opening of the train station. So some of the work that was planned for next year was brought forward to this year.
So just following up about the Allenbrook parking, obviously that's been done, so staff have committed an extra 150,000 than what's budgeted for. What gives that a more superior need than using 150,000 to get help with local laws that we haven't been able to do for 8 years?
Well, it's always difficult when you're comparing apples and oranges because they are completely different things in relation to, I think all councils will be aware of the urgency of the Ellenbrook parking issues and the reasons why that work had to be done at present in relation to getting help for local laws. As Mrs Hodgkins has explained, it was felt that that was better to do it internally with staff rather than using consultants.
And final questions to let other people have theirs. I probably missed a whole lot, but hopefully those that I've missed, I'll get answers in the next day or two. 15.2. How often councillors, sorry, I should say elected members, how often is elected members dialing in, zooming in, I don't know what you call it these days, to agenda forums, to OCMs, to specials, and all those? And am I correct that 2/3 of this council, these councillors here, no, 2/3 of the councillors on council, have never zoomed in to a meeting in the last financial year?
Ms Hodges?
Through you, presiding member, Councillor Bowman, as circulated this afternoon, with respect to agenda forums, Councillor Brodovnik has attended 3 electronically. Councillor Singh has attended 3 ordinary council meetings. Sorry, Councillor Singh has attended 3 agenda forums electronically. As to OCMs, Councillor Dawn has attended 1 electronically. Councillor Singh has attended 1 electronically. Briefings, Councillor McCulloch has attended 1 electronically, and Councillor Brodovnik has attended 2.
So, my maths getting late at night, but would I be right that only 3% of the attendance for briefings is by electronic means?
Who wants to do the maths on that one?
I'm not sure my maths is that good to be able to tell you the exact answer that quickly, but I would need to know how many briefings we've had in that period and then apply that to it.
Well, my understanding is there's been 100 in-person attendance at briefings, where three have attended electronically. Sorry.
You are correct, yes.
Madam Mayor, can we ask her as phone keeps going off to turn it on silent, please?
I'm sure that
So 100 plus 3 electronics, so that'd be roughly 3%.
You are correct.
So not too often.
Not too often.
Okay, thank you.
3.8. Thank you, Mr. Clayton. That's very specific. Councillor Catalano.
Oh yeah, thanks. Just getting back to the Ballajura Place base. So what was the total cost of that? Is it finished? Is it completely finished? And how much did it cost all up?
Yes, it is finished and it has been opened. I don't have the exact cost right in front of me, but we can supply that.
Oh, do you mind sending that to me, please? Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is about 14.1.2 waste law. I was not at the briefing the other night as I was at the PAMG. I'm looking at page 66, Schedule 2, Prescribed Offences. And I'd just like to ask, through you, Madam Mayor, to the responsible member of staff, presumably Mr. Cohen, how did we set the penalties? So it says modified penalty, and I'm looking in particular at 7, depositing unauthorised waste in a recycling waste receptacle. Fine is $350.
They were generally in line with the penalties that are in the Walga model local laws.
All right, and do we think that $350 is an appropriate amount?
Yes, that's what's recommended.
Okay, the reason I asked that question is that I'm thinking about the situation where we've got a family with a 140 litre red top waste bin. They've got 2 children producing nappies. The red top bin's full, it ends up going in the recycling bin, and Bob's your uncle, $350 fine. Is it perhaps a bit harsh on a family with a large mortgage and large rate payments?
Through you, Madam Mayor, certainly to impose a fine like that on somebody in a situation like that for a first offence would be harsh and unreasonable, and it is something that the city wouldn't do. As outlined at the briefing, where our preference is to use education. There are options, there's a range of options for people who do struggle to fit their waste into the 140 litre bins. People can upsize. We do have exemptions on medical grounds for people to get a 240 litre bin. People can request a 240 litre bin and pay the upsize fee if they want. We've had to date about 5% of the bit under 5% of the population have accepted that offer. We do offer a lot of help and support and give advice to people on how to manage in those circumstances. So certainly people wouldn't be fined for the first offence, and they wouldn't be fined the second, third or fourth offence. It would be the case we take an education approach, and we try, and in some cases with the FOGO bin or the recycling bin, if necessary, it would be removed. But these would be options that would be tried before fines. So it really would be an absolute last resort.
Thank you. My next question is, I'm just comparing item 7, $350, which is depositing unauthorised waste in a recycling waste receptacle. Then I look on the next page at 37, lighting a fire in a waste facility, which I would regard as quite a serious matter. A mere $300, so that was a bargain. So if you've ever been to a tip fire, you can imagine how bad it is. I mean, I'm just a bit puzzled at the difference. Yeah. A large-scale tip fire is just inconceivable. So what's the explanation for that? Sure, it should be like $10,000. Is it?
I'll take that on notice, but as I mentioned, these are modified penalties that are based on what's in the Walga local laws. So. But yeah, I can give you some more information.
Okay, thanks. The next question also is along the same lines. Item 41 on page 67. Acting in an abusive or threatening manner or failing to comply, so I think we've got a typo there, with request to leave the waste facility, $300. So it seems there's no, am I right in thinking that this is not particularly well, if you like, it's disproportionate? Someone putting a nappy in a recycling bin is going to get fined more than someone who either threatens someone or sets fire to an entire tip.
In cases of people threatening staff and things like that, there's also mechanisms for enforcement through the police as well. So that is sometimes an action that is taken. So an action of, this penalty may or may not be something that would be used, but there would be other mechanisms for dealing with that as well.
My next question is, again, on the waste law. If I'm looking at page 46, we have had some questions and answers tonight about the Walker model or local law template. So look on page 46, right at the top. The proposed local law is based on the Walker model local law template. As it's quite easy for me just looking at the fines to identify some anomalies there, how much time did we spend amending the Walker model local law template? So through you, Madam Mayor, to whoever can answer that, how much effort in terms of man days was spent on it?
Thank you, Mr. Creighton.
I don't think we would have that information, and we wouldn't have recorded it. It is something that staff began working on quite a while ago and have been looking at on and off since then. So we wouldn't have recorded the actual hours of staff time spent specifically on this, and there's been a number of different staff involved in it.
Okay, that actually raises another question. Do we not have a timesheet system to monitor how much time has been spent on particular projects? Because this is a clearly identifiable project creating a new local law. TAF should be recording time against a project like this. Do we have such a system?
Such a system exists for our outdoor workforce, but not for our indoor staff.
This is a major concern. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson, did you have a question from earlier? A lot earlier? I'm sure you do.
Thank you. I'll start off with when is a law a law? The bottom line is that we're talking about having a lenient approach and being kind to people and such like things. I would have thought if someone commits an offence under a law, we're talking about something that's signed off by the governor, they've committed an offence. So I'm trying to establish how this phasing in of a penalty exists, because I don't see that. Law is black and white, and I'm a little bit confused about that one. So do I have an answer on that, please?
Well, we can try, Mr. Caton.
Well, the Executive Manager of Governance may wish to comment, but I would point out that under the health local law, there are penalties that are applicable as well under the existing local laws, and they're ones that generally haven't been applied in such situations.
Indeed, thank you, but we're talking about this local law. Thank you.
Through you, presiding member, I'm just trying to find the actual section, but it does talk about, use the word may under enforcement. So it's not a compulsion, and obviously a law is a law once it's gazetted. I'm just trying to find the section for you. Yes, 6.2, notice of breach. Where a breach of any provision of this local law has occurred, the city may give notice in writing to the person alleged to be responsible for such breach, directing the person to take such action as an authorised person considers necessary within the timeframe specified in the notice.
Okay, so, yes, thank you for the may. So, okay, how many times may we do that? Because do we come back after the first May to a slam dunk, or where are we at with this? It just seems way too rubbery in that regard.
Most of our local laws, Councillor Henderson, do have similar provisions where we may choose to enforce, because part of what we try to do is to work with the community to educate, not necessarily to use the hammer, the sledge approach. We want to get people to comply with the local laws.
Okay, well, thank you for that response. The only point I would like to make in that regard is that if, for instance, resident A was nice and lovely and managed to string it out for 3 or 4 Mays, then they might have got away with things that long. But if resident B was angry about the approach and not happy, they might cop it in the head after the first May. The point I'm trying to get to, Madam Mayor, is that there is no ability in my mind to see some consistency here. And as I said, when's a law? So may in law, of course, gives staff some flexibility, but in terms of a magistrate's court, I would have thought that would get thrown out. So I'm struggling to understand how there's a control mechanism here. So if you can give me some more clarity on it, but I don't see it.
I might ask through you, Mr. Bishop.
Through you, Madam Mayor, just in addition to what the acting CEO has said in the manager governance, we also have a enforcement policy for the city. I think it's policy 154 from memory. That gives guidance to staff to enforcement of such legislation. And just as the acting CEO gave an example, that policy gives discretion to staff to recognise that in a situation such as a bin on a footpath, the appropriate action to take is an informal action, which is to give a warning, request that the correct action be done and explain why the reason is. But that policy also enables action to be escalated. So if there's repeat offence or it's a serious offence that presents a real present danger or hazard or anything like that, then the ability or the recommendation of that policy is obviously to go straight to taking formal action, such as an infringement notice or prosecution. Further to the earlier question on infringement notices, they're generally set at around 10% of the prosecution penalty. That's generally the standard default level set for infringement notices.
Thank you for that explanation, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to come to a point, though, that policy is something that we can utilise internally. Yes, that's variable, of course. So I really see that as a separate issue to a law, a local law. So I want to be sure in my mind that we're able to say to people that your our policy says this and you've been naughty, whereas the law says this, and if you're not going to do the right thing, we're going to slap you on the head. And the point I'm trying to get to is that I see no connection between policy and number of times someone's going to be warned, cajoled or whatever through education, etc. I said no connection to those to an outcome. So and I've got the point about the 10%, Mr. Bishop. So this doesn't give me any clarity about that, and I think for the residents, they would feel uncomfortable with it because they don't know exactly where they stand, and that's where you need to be with the law. You need to know exactly where you stand. So that was the first one. The other particular one was, we talk about under 462, page 62, talk about abusive and threatening. I'll put it on the table. Sometimes people tell me that they see that from city staff or feel that from city staff. So it's a bit of a one-way street. I wonder why we haven't addressed that.
Mr. Coaten?
Yeah, we certainly do address those issues when they arise. We do have a complaints policy for if members of the public have complaints about staff, so I can assure you that any staff who is found to be behaving aggressively or threatening manner to a member of the public is certainly dealt with.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I'm wondering about 3.1C2. Prevent the emission of offensive or noxious odours from each reciprocal. Are we going to have a sniffometer or something like that to be able to determine how these nappies or whatever stink?
We won't be going around smelling people's bins on a regular basis, if that's what you're suggesting, Councillor Henderson. It is just provide a mechanism in extreme cases to be able to manage that, to give staff some authority to manage it.
So there are methods to be able to take a sample of the odour and have it tested or whatever.
It's a job possibility for someone.
Yeah, I'm not sure about sampling for odour. I'd look to Mr. Bishop and his environmental health background.
Through you, Madam Mayor, it is possible to measure some odours, but obviously the costs and implications of that are significant. So it's basically an authorised person or an authorised officer is delegated under the legislation, and it's for them to make a determination as to whether that would appear to be an unreasonable odour that would cause a nuisance to those who are impacted by it.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The point I want to make about that is that some people have almost no sense of smell and might not think it's a problem, and others are terribly offended by a tiny bit of odour. So I wonder about how that can actually be dealt with. I'll just see what else I've got here.
I'll just jump to Councillor Bowman while you look. We'll go back and forth.
Just a follow-up question to that, and Councillor Henry, your bin may not be picked up this week, and you may not even be here on next Wednesday if you get elected. But will obviously councillors aware of a notice of motion I put in, which is on bins, FOGO, and all that. Will we know whether that's been approved before Monday, which may have an impact on this item that we may or may not be talking about right now?
Mr. Coaten.
I haven't had a chance to have a close look at it as yet, but we can let you know before the next meeting.
Just to get that down to technicalities, may I have that advice before Monday morning, because I may want to put in an alternative motion depending on the outcome of whether it's been accepted or not, and if I get it at the council meeting, I may have missed my chance unless the presiding member may use her discretion to actually allow the late amendment.
I'm sure we'll be able to provide that. Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
So can I just continue?
Wait, we'll go back to this one.
That was sort of like a top-up. 6.3.2, page 63. Beat you to it. I find it extraordinary that a person who commits an offence under the local law is liable or on conviction to a penalty not exceeding $5,000 if the offence is of a continued nature. It might be that I'm being a little bit picky here, but $5,000 we're going to go after someone because their nappies didn't quite make the grade or whatever it is that's in their bin. That is the single stopper that's going to have me vote against this, or at least ways to defer it until we can actually get down to some detail and make it work. And given I understand that staff have said that we've got this real tight timeline, Madam Mayor, I'm actually very concerned that we're almost being railroaded on this, and that worries me. That should not be allowed to happen. We need to be very focused on these things. The community are going to go off their face when they get their teeth into this, and we have got to have clarity before we proceed. So, whose idea was the $5,000, and how can we possibly consider that to be an acceptable figure?
Thank you, Mr. Coaten.
That's based on the figure that's in the WALGA model local.
Now, Deputy Mayor, you had a question?
Actually, no, Madam Mayor, because Councillor Henderson asked the exact question I was going to ask.
Councillor Catalano.
Yeah, that's about the issue about the use of discretion. You know, there's been a hell of a lot of complaints already about how discretion to tape up bins, to put notices on bins, to harass people out in the community about their bins when they haven't been properly informed. So I'm just, I mean, this discretion, you know, where is it in this document that spells out to everyone, myself included, how this discretion is going to be used? Because it can't be arbitrarily used. It's got to be used uniformly across the board for everybody. So, you know, when will we get the full details of how the discretion is going to be applied uniformly for everybody in the community?
Mr. Coaten.
We can circulate the enforcement policy that Mr. Bishop referenced earlier on.
Oh, but I'm talking about one that relates specifically to this policy.
Yeah.
Sorry, this law, not policy. Relates specifically to this law.
Yeah, the policy that Mr. Bishop referenced relates to all the enforcement work that the city undertakes.
Okay, so there's not going to be any policy that makes clear to households, that makes clear to staff, that makes clear to councillors how the discretion is going to be exercised in a uniform manner across the whole of the City of Swan. There's going to be no policy attached to this law.
There won't be a policy, through you, Madam Mayor, there won't be a policy specifically relating to this local law. And in regards to discretion, as I mentioned earlier, and I don't want to keep harping on about it, but education is always our first approach. We do undertake an enormous amount of education, and you mentioned, you know, people's bins being tagged and things like that. And the reason we do that is because contamination in our recycling bins and our FOGO bins costs money, and it costs the ratepayers money because we've got to pay considerable extra money to dispose of contamination. So that's part of our education process in letting people know when they've done the right thing, when they have contaminated their bin. And so we always, you know, go back several times. We do follow-up audits with them. Staff sit down with them and explain what's needs to be in that bin and why it's been tagged.
So then, just talking about the cost effectiveness of, you know, instituting this kind of law and actually being able to enforce it in a manner that's fair to the community, wouldn't it have been better, or isn't it better for us, and isn't it more cost effective for us to actually get it right and to properly consult with the community before we start instituting laws that are going to actually cost us a lot of money in you know, legal fees, fighting them down at the magistrates' court?
Well, through you, Madam Mayor, I would dispute that we're going to spend a lot of money in legal fees fighting them at the magistrates' court. As I mentioned, you know, a number of penalties are already applicable under the current health local law, and you know, generally then we don't need to enforce them because education works with people.
Because I have a question, possibly for Mr. Bishop, is with these prescribed offences, how does the City of Swan educate the public about what's coming? What have we done in terms of, with our education and our posts, are these included anywhere in those posts or material that's available in the community for us to put this out first before we...
Yep, thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, look, this local law is consistent with many other local laws covering a wide range of subject. The penalties are consistent as infringement penalties, as well as the penalty that you might attract by going to court. As mentioned earlier, yeah, the standard practice is to educate wherever possible, and it's only really where it's either a serious offence or a repeat offence. We then marry that up with educational material, whether it be on website or social media, whether it be educating about managing dogs in parks or whatever it may be. Yeah, so the other thing just to state, which has been touched upon, is many of these provisions have existed for decades in previous local laws, particularly the health local law, and under the Health Act. They have actually been there, albeit in slightly different form or different wording or in different legislation, but they largely predate. As the report summarises, this is really bringing together a lot of provisions that existed in 1, 2 or 3 different local laws into one local law that focuses on waste management.
Thank you. I mean, we see it in the community often when there are parking issues, and Facebook and people that know where to find the information generally jump online and then will post for everyone what these rules are. And I just wondered if we were doing more about printing this and actually physically getting out there before we get someone in the community that has to post it on Facebook. How are we putting this material out?
In my view on this subject of waste management, there has been an enormous amount of information going out, and I understand that would continue to be the case, because there is obviously a clear need still to continue to educate.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson.
Thank you. I just wanted to get a handle on, through our current system and through education, what percentage of failure, if you like, have we tried to get down to? Is it 5%, 1%, 3%? How far have we tried to get down to? And the next question that's going to flow from that, I'll give it to you now, is a local law going to do any better than that? So I want to, clearly we're always going to have X amount of duds. So can I have some idea of whether or not we think we're going to improve that, and by what amount?
In relation to both recycling and FOGO, obviously we're trying to get contamination down as low as we can. In relation to FOGO, the penalties apply when the contamination rate is greater than 9%. And so obviously we're aiming to get less than that. The information from other councils who've implemented it is, you know, they're typically getting 3 to 4, 5, 6% contamination. We're actually have recently undertaken some bin audits of the areas where we've been doing FOGO and to assess the contamination. We haven't actually got the report for that as yet, but we hope to receive that soon, and we'll be briefing council on it. And to emphasise that the purpose of this local law isn't solely aimed at just getting the contamination rates down. There's a lot of other things associated with our waste management practices and systems, and this local law puts it all together in one place.
Yeah,
so certainly in terms of the getting contamination down, education is our primary means of doing that.
Yeah, I can see that. So the next thing that I have is that Schedule 1, page 65. The Europeans introduced what they called the WEEE program, WEE. It was all about removing electronic waste from the landfill. The reason they did it, and It's not to do with the fact that it's physical bulk, but the reason they did it was because of lead used in solder. And the argument was that lead was causing contamination. Well, for many years now, manufacturing has not used lead. So just about everything you buy, all these things will have lead-free in them. So the point is, why are we under point E, non-collectibles, electrical and electronic equipment? Because we know that copper and such other things is valuable and can be used to great effect. So why are we saying that we're not going to, it's non-collectible waste?
Through you, Madam Mayor, there was some state legislation came into place recently that prohibited the disposal of electronic waste in landfill. So we do offer other solutions for people now to get rid of electronic waste, either through their collections or specifically through drop-off points, Malaga and Bullsbrook.
Okay, thanks. And point, is it point L? Any other waste determined by the local government to be non-collectible? That's just way too open. Why is that there?
Through you, Madam Mayor, that would be to consider things that that haven't been identified as part of that. There may be things, waste streams that come into being, or there becomes a reason why they should be non-collectible that, you know, perhaps at this time aren't. So that covers us for those sort of situations.
So what certainty does the community have, or understanding that they have in terms of what they can dispose of? So if we get to about year 10 out of the 15 years, how do we deal with that through the community?
As those sort of things arise, they would be communicated to the community if anything does arise. I wouldn't imagine that there would be a lot of things, if anything.
Okay, and I think I'm just about done on this one. Will the penalties be indexed?
Take that one.
No, they wouldn't be. They'd be, unless, happy to stand corrected, but they're documented in the local law. I don't believe they would be.
So I guess that today I can get hit for $350, but in 15 years, today against today's value, it might be worth $10. So okay, I understand. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, my question relates to depositing unauthorised waste in a recycling waste receptacle. Thinking of the example that I gave earlier, what's the current fine for depositing on something unsuitable in a recycling receptacle?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'd have to check the local law, but under the Health Local Law 2002, there are very similar provisions to what's in this one about not putting things that you shouldn't put in a wheelie bin. I know that the fine under, I'm pretty sure under that, I can check it in a moment, but I'm pretty sure the fine under that local law is $1,000 and a minimum of $100 fine.
All right.
I'll look it up if you like.
Somewhere between 100 and 1,000.
Micro.
So the Part 10 of offences in the current Health Local Law, a person who contravenes a provision, a person who commits an offence under subclause 1 liable to a penalty of not more than $1,000 and not less than $100 in the case of first offence. A second offence is $200. A third offence is $500. And if the offence is a continuing offence, a daily penalty not more than $100 and not less than $50 for each day. So they're the penalties that apply right now.
That sounds kind of a bit more realistic. And my next question relates to, we've spoken about the fact there's no actual policy associated with this law regarding the discretion of applying the fines, but through you, Madam Mayor, I did hear Mr Bishop talk about a general enforcement policy. Do we have a policy relating to the enforcement of fines in the city? Do we have such a thing, a public document relating to fine enforcement?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the only policy is that enforcement policy that we referenced earlier, which will, I believe, has been taken on notice to circulate that. That applies a standard escalatory process of if it's something significant, severe, imminent threat, we escalate up to a higher penalty or issuing an infringement notice. But as per standard practice, if it's something like a contaminant in a bin or the bin in the wrong location, it's about education and warning people to try and get to do the right thing first.
Okay, thank you.
I had a question from Councillor Singh.
Thank you. It's about 15.2. Is the council has a record about how many absence in the meetings, any elected members? Because as we discussed, how many apologize and electronic meetings we had from the elected members. So as I know, that is half information in the meeting. So we should know that how many absence from any elected member without notice in any meetings. Is the council have all the records? If they have, I ask to send to them an email, please.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Yes, we do keep a record through our minutes of absences. We do, obviously we have apologies, and then we have leave of absences, and then we have absences, e.g. when a councillor doesn't take the time to proffer their apology.
They not notify anything and just absence from the meetings or forums or the workshops. And another question is, if someone on the leave of absence about 3 months, so how many leave of absence we count about every year, every month? Should have three counts of leave of absence or just one? About three meetings in the 3 months. So if somebody on leave on absence of 3 months or 4 months, any conditions or medical, so how many leave of absence we count, the council counting?
You can have up to 3 months, but further than that, you need ministerial approval.
No,
You're asking,
the
do you
question
need
is
one for
how
each
many leave
month?
of absence we count. So leave, like 3 meetings, we got 3 meetings, every month we have a meetings and forums. So we count every meetings as each leave of absence.
You're asking, do you need one leave of absence for the 3 months, or do you need one for each of the months? Yeah, it's
So you need to apologise or advise when you're not coming for each meeting. So for a workshop, for a briefing, for a council meeting, unless you have applied officially for leave.
yep. So which is what you said.
Is it?
If you have a leave of absence for 3 months, you're asking, do you need to only put in one leave of absence for that 3 month period, or do you need to do it for each individual month?
You just need to put in one leave of
It'll
absence.
cover you for that
and
whole
that covers
3
you
month
for all those meetings that occur.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Just reading through 15.2, I noticed there's some, although the words are correct, there's some kind of slight typographical issue. Can I send it through again to be adjusted?
Yeah.
Oh, it's just the way the...
Would you like to read it out so we know?
no, it wouldn't make any difference if I read it out. I'll send it. I'll send
Okay.
it through. It's just the way it's presented typographically. It's just very slightly wrong. I think it's clear what it means, but
No
the
problem.
words are the same. So, give you an example. So, where it says there, we've got 1, 2, 3. Number 2 there is actually within quotes, and it's so that number 2 is erroneous. So it should basically say it's too hard to explain. It'll be here all day. I'll send it out, explaining what it should look like.
Okay. Councillors, Councillor Henderson.
Okay, thanks. On page 121, which is 14.16, the recommendation, note the implications of the changes required by the amendments. Should it not say, note the implications of the changes required by the state government amendments? Because that's what's been imposed on us, I believe.
Could you just repeat that for everyone who didn't hear you?
Oh, I'm sorry, now I'll get back on mic. Number one, note the implications of the changes required by the amendments, it says. I'm saying, well, we've been told by the state that this is going to have to happen, so shouldn't it say required by the state government amendments?
Through you, presiding member, I think in the item, the Local Government Amendment Bill 2024 Part 2 has been defined as the amendments, but I actually think for the purposes of the resolution, it should be set out in full. So it should refer to the Local Government Amendment Bill 2022 Part 4, Part 2.
Okay, thank you. I've got one other when everyone else is finished.
No, if you've got a question. Okay. Is there anyone else who has a question while Councillor Henderson finds his? Nope. Are you sure? Okay. Councillors, are there any other questions for
I've got it
staff?
now. When do you require notice for nominations for the EMRC? Can it be up to and during the meeting, or does it have to be beforehand?
Next week. Ms. Hodgson?
Through you, presiding member, it can be either during the meeting or beforehand.
Okay. Councillors, are there any final questions for staff? No. Okay, well, that brings us to the closure for tonight's meeting at 7:45, and thank you to everyone in the gallery, to those watching at home, and to staff and councillors.